Good afternoon and welcome to the Women's Fund of Winston-Salem's 15th Annual Luncheon. I'm Wanda Stark, Special Projects Producer and Anchor at WXII 12 News and your MC for today's event. I'm also a proud member of the Women's Fund of Winston-Salem. It is hard to believe that it has been 15 years and that we're having to celebrate in this way. None of us could have ever predicted what this year would bring, and it pains us not to see your smiling faces and to see all of the many reunions that happen when we come together at this time each year. Nevertheless, we persist. Our theme for today's event is, where do we go from here? The type of theme you have when it literally feels like we have no clue what the next day, let alone the next year, will bring. You'll hear more about our theme later, but for now, we want to encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram throughout today's event. And please use the hashtag WomenOfWS anytime you post something about the event. We are showing the luncheon via Facebook Live in addition to Zoom, so feel free to ask your Facebook friends to join us by clicking on the Women's Fund's Facebook page. I would also like to take this time to thank our generous luncheon sponsors. Special thanks go out to our presenting sponsor, BB&T, now Truist, our presenting sponsor for the second year in a row. Our platinum leadership sponsors, the Winston-Salem Journal and Winston-Salem Monthly Magazine. Our gold partner sponsors, Forsyth Magazines, People Development Partners, and Wake Forest Baptist Health. And our silver partner sponsors, Ms. Charlotte Haynes, The Chronicle, the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts, K-PASA Media, Trellis Supportive Care, Wells Fargo Foundation, and Winston-Salem State University. We also want to thank the Winston-Salem Delta Fine Arts Center for providing us with an incredible space to film for the luncheon. And lastly, we want to give a very special thank you to the Winston-Salem Foundation for continuing to provide critical operating support so that all funds we raise can go directly to our grant-making, programming, and endowment. We have listed all of the 15th Annual Luncheon sponsors as well as our annual tribute gifts on the Women's Fund's new website. Each year, members and community friends make generous gifts in tribute to those who have most influenced or touched their lives. Gifts in honor or memory of a friend or family member are an important way to support the Women's Fund with donations that help improve the lives of women and girls in Forsyth County. I encourage you to visit womensfundws.org to see the incredible tribute gifts made this year, learn more about the fund, read grantee stories of impact, and more. And now, let's get started with our program for this afternoon. First up, we will have our presenting sponsor, Truist, provide a few remarks. Following Truist, you will hear from Gwen Clements and Andrea Hulligan, who will share some words from the Women's Fund, as well as provide some exciting updates. They will be followed by an engaging panel discussion about the status of the economic security of women and girls in our community, before I return to share with you the 2020 Women's Fund grant recipients.
Good afternoon. My name is Will Balcom. I work for BB&T, now Truist, as a commercial relationship manager. On behalf of all of us at Truist, I'm pleased to welcome you to the Women's Fund 15th Annual Luncheon Celebration. Although we're not able to be together in person this year, we appreciate you joining us for this virtual event. Our purpose as a company is to inspire and build better lives and communities, and we recognize the importance of economic security and opportunity in creating better communities. The work of the Women's Fund, through the advocacy, collaboration, and grant-making, is creating meaningful differences in the lives and futures of women and girls throughout Forsyth County. We're pleased to join you in these efforts. Thank you for your ongoing commitment to the Women's Fund. Enjoy today's event.
Thank you to Truist for their continued support and to all of our sponsors. This year, all luncheon sponsorships went directly to the Women's Fund Grant-Making Fund in order to provide more funding for the incredible work so many organizations are doing to positively impact the economic security of women and girls in our community. You will hear how those dollars will be spent when we announce our grant recipients toward the end of the program. My name is Gwen Clements, Chair of the Board for the Women's Fund. I would like to say welcome to all of you joining us today, albeit virtually. We've missed you. This year, we have been able to connect with you through a virtual format. However, it just isn't the same. We miss the reunion-like atmosphere created when we get together, such as all of the hugs, laughter, and friendly chatter that normally fills the room and creates the Women's Fund experience. We also miss enjoying a meal with you, but hope that you are at your screens right now, enjoying a delicious lunch from one of your favorite women-owned restaurants. While we know it is difficult to feel a sense of community through a screen, we are confident that you will feel the incredible energy of the hundreds of people joining us today who share in the belief that all women and girls should have what they need to achieve economic security.
Yes, Gwen, we are so excited to have everyone join us today. My name is Andrea Hulligan, and I serve as the Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Winston-Salem Foundation and have the honor of working with the Women's Fund. It is hard to believe that it has been 15 years since our first annual luncheon. Today, we wanted to take time to marvel in what the vision of a few women has become and to honor the countless women who have helped along the way to grow the Women's Fund into what it is today. For those of you joining us for the first time, you may not know that the idea of the Women's Fund started with 5 friends who wanted to change the fact that nationally only a small percentage of philanthropic dollars specifically go to efforts focused on women and girls. Those 5 women then invited others to join them in their dream, and the Women's Fund quickly became a reality. Many of those pioneering women had a virtual mini reunion just before this event, which just goes to show that the relationships you develop while involved with the Women's Fund can last a lifetime. We also know that many of our Women's Fund groups have continued to find ways to engage with each other, even when they have not been able to meet in person.
Since our first luncheon, we have had hundreds of women become members of the fund as a way to pool their resources with others to make a larger impact on the economic security of women and girls in our community. For those who do not know, each and every one of our members has a voice in the grant-making process and has the opportunity to vote for which of the various proposals should receive funding each year. We have also had many women who have not just given financially, but who have also given their time to serve on the various committees of the Women's Fund and the board. Grateful doesn't even begin to capture how we feel about those who have given their time, talents, and treasure to the work of the fund. In the last 15 years, we have granted over $1.75 million to directly support the economic security of women and girls in our community. This year in particular, we will award over $142,000 due to the generous support of our members giving above and beyond to add to our grant-making dollars when demand for our services and resources proved to be particularly high this year. We truly value your dedication to the issues impacting women and girls. This level of investment over the last 15 years would not have been possible without all of the incredible members, volunteers, and supporters who have continued to build on the idea of those 5 friends so many years ago.
The Women's Fund is more than just a grant maker, though. And over the years, we have produced a variety of research reports to inspire our community to advocate for policies that positively impact women and girls. We have also hosted countless events where we have engaged in conversations about how we can create change beyond financial investments and how each and every one of us has a role to play in supporting women and girls. There's so much to celebrate about all that has been accomplished, but we also know there is much work to be done. As you all know, to say this year has been challenging is an understatement. Research has shown that women in particular have been hard struck by the pandemic, with many being in career fields that have put them at higher risk to contract COVID-19 or to lose their jobs, while still others have had to balance working with young children in the home. We have heard the struggles from our grantee partners in trying to pivot to continue to operate safely, while also trying to meet increased demand for basic necessities for the women and girls that they work with on a regular basis.
We knew we had to do something different with our grant-making process this year to make it more relevant to the challenges our local nonprofits were identifying and to make it less burdensome for them to access funding. As a result, we transitioned to an online application with fewer questions, allowed organizations to have more flexibility in asking for general program or operating support, and used virtual site visits to learn more about their work and how they were handling the negative effects of the pandemic. Then we learned of the senseless death of Breonna Taylor. The board had been talking about how we can understand the experiences of women of color and how race and gender intersect. Our interest and concern was particularly heightened due to the numerous injustices we witnessed this summer. And all of these things together just amplified the need for us to do more. The board committed to meeting monthly to have honest and open dialogue with one another about race, while also recognizing that we must turn this dialogue into action. The board has begun to take some of our practices and processes using a racial equity framework that challenges us to think through how our actions may unintentionally exclude women and girls of color, or even worse, harm them. There is much work to be done, and it will take all of us to make it so race and gender no longer serve as predictors of one's life's outcomes.
This leads us to our 2020 Gender Lens Report. When the fund released its first Gender Lens Report in 2010, we committed to releasing a similar report every 5 years as a way to use data to show how women and girls were faring, with specific attention to issues affecting economic security. This year's report will look very different from the previous two reports. First, it is online. We felt this was important to help improve accessibility, and it will enable us to update it with key information more frequently. You can access the report by visiting the link at the bottom of the screen. Second, you will notice that we have been very intentional in providing context for many of the different data points. We felt it was extremely important to provide some reasoning as to why the data is the way it is, because it can be so easy to make assumptions about charts and graphs. We know that women and girls of color are having a different experience than their white peers, and we know that this is a result of systemic issues rather than individual choices. Lastly, you will likely notice that there are much fewer stories and narrative compared to previous reports. This was also intentional because we want the community to play a role in helping us determine the narrative for this report, and more importantly, what actions the Women's Fund and the broader community need to take to improve the economic security of women and girls in our community. We will be launching a 3-part virtual series at the beginning of 2021, where we will invite you to dig into the report with us and have honest dialogue to help inform future advocacy efforts focused on women and girls, particularly women and girls of color. We look forward to sharing more about this series in the coming months, and we hope you will join us in 2021 for this extremely critical work. To help us get started, we have invited an incredible group of women to discuss the key takeaways from the report. We hope you gain as much from this conversation as we did. After the panel discussion, we will go right into the announcement of the 2020 grant recipients, something you will not want to miss.
Thank you again for joining us in this virtual experience. We are extremely grateful to all of you and to all of our members for making this grant cycle and year a success.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Fuller, and I serve as a member of the board of the Women's Fund. I'm also the founder of Fuller Impact, through which I provide consulting to nonprofits and foundations. I am so excited about our conversation today. We have a fantastic panel for you. With us, we have Melissa Witt-Glover, the CEO and president of Gramercy Research, and the new Executive Director of the Council on Black Health. Congratulations, I'm glad you're here. Tawana Wellman, the Executive Director of Experiment and Self-Reliance. And Odette Sanchez, the Executive Director of Latino Community Services. Thank you all so much for being here, for your time and your presence. So to get started, you all have had a chance to read the new Gender Lens report that folks just heard about, but our audience hasn't. So what we've seen as we looked at the report are pretty consistent and significant disparities and inequities between women and men, and more specifically between white women and women of color. So my first question to get us started is there anything that surprised you in the report? And if you'd start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your work. Who wants to start?
Guess I'll start, since I'm in the middle. My name is Tawana Wellman Roebuck, and so I am the Executive Director of Experiment and Self-Reliance. And Lori, if I could be perfectly honest, I was not surprised at all with the information that came out of the study. Experiment and Self-Reliance, known as ESR, is one of those organizations that provide services for the low to moderate income families. Majority of our clients that we serve are females. And so I was not surprised, because oftentimes when we have an interaction with our clients, the struggle of employment, the struggle of childcare services, transportation, all of that is so prevalent in their lives. And so when we look at the study that shows the difference in the income base between men and women, and specifically women of color, I was not surprised, but at the same time, a little bit disappointed that we had not grown as far as possible or as far as we could be. And but it did give me hope that there is possibilities around the actions that we as a community can take.
Great. And we definitely want to dig into more of those actions and possibilities. But Melissa or Odette, things that surprised you?
Odette Sanchez, Executive Director for Latino Community Services, now known as Latino Community, also known as El Buen Pastor Latino Community Services. No, I wasn't surprised to see the outcome of the information obtained. I think that we still have so much to work, and it is actually accurate with what the sentiment that is being actually shared within the communities. And I think that that's the reason why we do the work that we do, to be able to help our families, to be able to equip the families that we serve, to be able to level the playing field for our girls that we serve also, to build and instill confidence in them and create capacity for them to feel that they are capable of being able to succeed just like any other girl, and same with the ladies as well.
And Melissa Whitt-Glover, again, president of Gramercy Research Group here in town, and also executive director for the Council on Black Health. The work that I do primarily is focused on promoting health and health-related behaviors, primarily in communities of color, specifically Black communities. When we do our work, we look at not only individual behaviors, but we also look at things that surround that influence behaviors, like social determinants of health, income being one of those. And so I absolutely wasn't surprised, because if income is a marker of whether or not people have access to things related to health, and we know that the populations that have the highest issues related to health are the same populations that have the lowest income, then those things track together. In terms of what we can do, and also why I'm not surprised, is because many of the reasons that we see disparities in things like income are because of policies, systems, and environments that are put in place to make those things happen. For the most part, those policies are not implemented and enacted by women or by women of color. So if people who are making the decisions don't look like, excuse me, or represent the populations that are most impacted, then of course you're going to see these disparities. And so, one of the things we've got to continue to do is to get engaged in making those policies that are driving these differences.
Yes, absolutely. And a great lead in to a question about how we got here, because this wasn't by chance. One of the key data points in the survey, and you all have alluded to the income difference, is that the median income of Black and Latino women working full-time was 60% of and 40% of the median income of white males, respectively. If you look at women to men compared overall, women's earnings are 81% of men's. So you referenced, Melissa, you talked about some of the policies and things that are in place that have led to this, that have gotten us here to where we are. I wonder whether it's that or other things. Are there factors that are particularly relevant to how we got here in this place, in our own community of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County?
In terms of the differences in income, in terms of I think we haven't, so for example, we know from the previous Women's Funds reports that a person working a full-time minimum wage job has to work 2.1 full-time minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet in this community. We know that many times when someone's working a job that pays minimum wage, they often don't have paid time off. They often don't have access to insurance, or lots of the things that are drivers of what people have to spend their money on. We know that there are 0 cities in the United States, which includes Forsyth County, where someone with a minimum wage job can afford to rent a two-bedroom housing. We know that things like home ownership are ways that people can have assets that can help their income. And so when we think about how we got here, we could start with things like living wage. We haven't raised our living wage in our community. And so if you think that there are more women and more people of color who are working jobs that don't pay a living wage, you are continuing to dig a hole that people can't get out of. And we haven't changed any of those as a community in years. So,
Well, as I think about it, I think we need to look at generational poverty. And so when you look at generational poverty and you've got the head of the household that still lives within the same dwelling, within the same community, you begin to have almost a trickle-down effect. So then you have mom who's not making enough money, who works at least the 2 jobs to try to sustain the family. And then the daughter that eventually becomes head of her household. And you begin to have just a pattern. And so until we address generational differences within the family, generational poverty, generational concerns, specifically around housing, healthcare, as well as the income, you almost have a domino effect. And that's part of the reason why we have not seen a change, as well as that's a part of the reason why we're here where we are. In low wealth neighborhoods, you typically see the same thing, wherein there are people that are working multiple jobs. You have mothers, you have daughters, and so you continue the pattern of the same thing. And until we address environmental community change within neighborhoods, until we're able to change and make a difference within neighborhoods, I don't know if we will see a quick pace of success until we address generational poverty.
Well, I feel that as Melissa had mentioned, and Tawana also, that the prices for things are going up. We have the housing price going up. We have groceries going up. Insurance, health insurance is so essential. It's going up. But again, the wages are still, it feels like it's plateau. It's just not increasing. So we have to be able to come to a point where it meets and it becomes equal, that the wages go up just as the prices of things and the cost of living, it's going up. And this, which is one of the reasons why a lot of families are moving from the north, where things have become most expensive, for example, New York, to the south here in Virginia, North Carolina specifically, South Carolina, but we have seen a tremendous increase here in North Carolina because of the cost of living. I moved from New York and here 17 years ago. And one of the things that I had in mind was because it's lower cost of living, we will be able to afford better living here than we did in New York. But the income, hasn't caught up yet. And so that's one of the things that we actually have to see, that how can we actually bring it to level so that we can actually be able to help our families and raise healthy families and make sure that they are able to go to school, be able to have a meal, which is so important before they go to school, be able to feel that they are capable of having their own families also as well. So it comes with the mental and the stress that a lot of our young ladies have, how they're going to be able to help their families if they're not able to make it from the level that they're in also as well.
I'm hearing in your comments both the connections of all of these issues as well as the cumulative effects both over time within a family and over generations within neighborhoods. And Tawana, you specifically started to mention some of the additional issues in addition to income, education, and housing, affordability of insurance, education. With all of these connected issues and the way that we are working to address them as a community, who in your experience, both in the effects, who is living with the impacts and the negative effects of these statistics and these policies and this economic situation, who is most impacted and their voice is not at the table?
It's interesting that we're in a city of education and a city of the arts, but yet I think the people that may not necessarily be at the table are our younger couples that are experiencing educational debt. Mm-hmm. We have now in our education network, we have so many individuals and couples that carry student loan debt. And so I believe their voices need to be heard. We have done a fairly good job in inviting a variety of people to the table, but yet when we have conversations around debt management and money management, we continually see clients that are struggling with student loan debt. We're looking at people that have high school, continuing education after that, master level degrees, but yet the debt that they've accumulated to get their masters is just unreal. So now you have student loan debt, and then you have just basic living expenses. So with the cost of renting a house, we also see a deficit with this particular body of people where there's less homeowners. There's less of a structure in terms of just making the ends meet. So you look at the trajectory of education, oftentimes you're looking at people that come out of high school and with the mindset that they want to go on to a Forsyth Tech or to some of our higher learning institutes that are within Winston-Salem. And oftentimes because there's not available funds within their coffers, they get a student loan to sustain them. And so we are seeing more and more young people with student loan debt that is almost shackling their possibilities of moving to that next stage in life towards home ownership and even having a family. We're seeing more and more people that are delaying the family, developing their family because of the debt that they're carrying. Mm-hmm. And I think they're not at the table. We need to hear from them to learn what can we do differently. Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that, and I think also I would say honestly, if I go back to my earlier point, where a lot of the policies that are put in place that are continuing to cause these effects are put in place by people who don't look like the people who are being impacted, and so that tends to be women, lower income people who earn lower incomes, and then people of color. not at the table, not at the table making decisions. But I also worry that those who have the opportunity and the power to make decisions are waiting for those who are impacted to ask for things that really should be basic human rights. And so we are expecting people who are impacted to be able to figure out how to solve problems that they didn't create. And that's not right. And so while those voices are not at the table, it is not as if we don't know what needs to happen to improve these situations. And so we can't continue to sit back. Those who are decision makers, those who are in power, cannot continue to sit back and say, well, even when we think about disparities in schools, we can't continue to sit back and say, well, those lower income schools didn't ask for those services, so that's why they didn't get them. We know what's needed, and we have to start pretending that we don't, and that we're just waiting for people to ask the right questions. So who's not at the table, that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability and the power and the knowledge to implement and impact.
And what would it take? What would it take to shift so that the folks with the decision-making power do make decisions based on what we do know would shift some of these, and to not only have those voices most impacted at the table, but have supporting them in crafting and actually implementing their own solutions. And that those are two shifts together, and I'm just wondering what it would take to do that.
I think that holding community conversations and hearing what is the sentiment and address or hear what is it that families, especially the women's and the young girls in our community, the challenges that they're facing, and looking for a solution that will actually help us to be able to move them forward. Instilling confidence in them, providing resources, supporting organizations, not-for-profits that are actually diligently working directly with the community and touching the need of the community. But I think that we won't know until we bring them to the table first and hear what is specifically the needs that the families are facing. And believe it or not, a lot of families have thought about this, and in their mind they'll say, well, in an ideal world, this is what I will see the solution to be. But it's a matter of bringing them to the table and having those conversations and then working together with them. The families that we serve are not looking for a handout. They're looking to be taught the know-hows. How do we get to where we need to? Teach us how to do it, because we want to be able to help our families. We want to be able to create sustainability for our families and the support. And so I think that that's some of the things that we actually need to do. We need to hear them out. We need to hear our families in our community and value their opinion and their input also as well.
I have a personal motto that when you know better, you can do better. And so what that means is when you have the self-empowerment through the knowledge of possibilities, then you can pass that down generationally within your family structure. I also believe that when you lead, you bring one with you. And so what that means is, as when there's people not at the table, we as leaders, and especially as females, need to know that we're there to speak on behalf of the voiceless. And sometimes at the table, people may not know. And so when we're in those settings where policies and decisions are made, we have to share how this choice could impact others. And when you raise the awareness and educate the people even at the table about the choices that we can make and the policies that we have in place and how that impacts the communities of low wealth, how that impacts those individuals to not necessarily have enough income to support their families. So when we look at livable wages and when we look at the minimum wage, think about what does that really mean? Most families that are in this particular situation that are receiving low income, they're working 2 jobs. So now you have a trickle-down effect. That mom is not home with her children. And so lots of kinds of things happen. And so as a leader, I want to make sure that I'm cognizant personally, that I'm not just at the table as Tawana. I'm at the table on behalf of the people that voices need to be heard.
Melissa, I'm wondering from you specifically, since I think you were the first to raise the environmental, the systemic issues, and these are all connected. Like we've talked about, that there's some people that don't know what the situation is. There's some people that know the solutions and need to act on those. There are people that need the know-how and the support to make individual decisions. We've also talked about several times how making what seem to be the right decisions in order to get ahead economically have negative consequences, such as you're working 2 jobs and not able to support your family in the way that you would want to. We've also talked about getting a college degree and how that can actually backfire and make it get ahead harder, even if you did that in order to better yourself economically. So with all of those, Melissa, I'm wondering what it would take to start making some of those policy shifts and start moving on some of those environmental things that would open up the possibilities for people who do seek out the know-how and are seeking out individual decisions and have mentors that are supporting them as they move forward.
So it's a great question. And I'm not sure I know what the specifics are. I know that we need radical change. And I also know in this community, and as a researcher, I love a good study. Love data, love a good study. But we have studied some of our issues to death. And we have brought people to the table. And no matter how many times we collect data or how many ways we collect it, what we know in Winston-Salem is that it takes $19.54 an hour on average for a position for that to be a living wage. If our minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour, it doesn't matter how many times we study it. It doesn't matter how many classes we take people through on money management. $7.25 does not equal $19.54, no matter how many ways you slice it. We have to be willing to be radical and make the changes. And what that means, and sometimes I think it gets scary because we have such a divide between people who are in the lower income bracket and people who are in the higher income bracket. And we don't, sometimes people who are in the higher income bracket, we are so afraid of giving something up that it's going to negatively impact us, but we can all rise together if we all, and maybe I sound like a socialist or a liberal or whatever, but we can all rise together because we have this huge divide. And we continue to say, well, if we just study it a bit more, if we do one more study, if we bring people to the table, when we bring people to the table, they are saying the same thing. I moved here in 2003. The data that we're getting from people has not changed, but we also have not acted. We have not, I watch as we talk about the importance of home ownership, and we talk about that being an asset. But at the same time, those who are in power who can value homes are consistently devaluing people's homes, and so they're impacting that asset. We have to have radical changes. And if that means that we need to bring people to the table who are decision makers who are different than the ones that we have now, then that's what needs to happen. If it means that we need to understand how our political process works so we can hold those people who are in office accountable, then that's what needs to happen. But we can't continue to study. We have analysis paralysis, and we can't continue to do that because we know what it takes, an hourly wage. We just have not been willing to change that. We can't expect somebody to work 2.1 jobs and still cook nutritious meals for their families and still show up for PTA meetings, and still that's the people who are thriving aren't doing that. We can't, it's not feasible, and we have to recognize that and be willing to act.
How do we act? How do we act collectively and as individuals? And you've mentioned some ideas of learning about the political process, of working to put people in those places of decision making that look more like and come from the communities that are most affected. What else can we do, both as a community as the Women's Fund specifically, and even as individuals, as a first step towards something different beyond what we're doing now?
I listened to her talk about radical changes. And so now, because of the pandemic, we have so many people, especially mothers, head of households, we have children at home that are experiencing the e-learning. One place to start is to make sure that in the households, people have internet. I mean, that's pretty simple. A hotspot, some type of connection. And so that we've got the adequate possibilities within the home structure. And I know that there were laptops and computers and tablets and so forth given to various households. But until we have the connections to make that happen, that's when it's going to be possible. The other radical thinking that I've thought about is if in our city, if we could get industries to consider some type of child care service as a part of their infrastructure of a benefit for working mothers. It's hard. I went through my life wherein I was a single mother with 2 children in high school, 1 in college. And so that's way beyond childcare years. But I also remember the time when, oh gosh, in the summertime when they were out of school trying to get that child to camp. That is some hurdles. And yet, if there had been some type of service within my infrastructure at my job, that would have eliminated some of the stressors that I had just getting to work. And there's so many other people that have those same stressors around childcare. We're blessed in our community where our healthcare providers have childcare on their sites. And I would like to just encourage other industries to consider the same thing. Because it's a struggle to be the head of the household. I'm already not making enough money, but now I got to figure out about childcare. And beyond just childcare, we also need to look at licensed services. So we've got children that are ready to read when they land in pre-K or the 5-year-old class. So not just childcare that's just open to say I'm open. It's got to be suitable childcare wherein the child is set up in a possibility to learn to read, to learn to do some of the math things. It is just mind-boggling, the analysis of our children in our community that struggle in reading and in math. And so that needs to begin, with us as a society in supporting the efforts in our child care settings so that they learn sight words. I'm a former elementary school teacher. And so that they learn those words. And also that we spend time with the child. Allow time at the workplace for a mom to be able to, if her child gets sick, that she can go home. So that you don't get your money and everything slashed because you gotta go home because your child is sick. And the same for us that are now at the age that might have a seasoned parent that we're taking care of. And so the time that we can have to provide that quality of care as a household and as a female head of household for both my child, if my child is sick, or if I've got a seasoned adult that is ill as well.
You mentioned COVID, and I want to make sure that we talk about the pandemic, which has the lens through which we are all living. How are you seeing COVID-19 specifically and its associated crises affecting women of color? And are there things that we should be doing based on that situation?
I would say that there is so much now that we're learning from experiencing the pandemic of COVID-19 that we're not actually out there to help resources and even data of the challenges that communities are facing. I say that one of the individuals that are mostly being affected by this is definitely women and girls, but specifically women of color. And mentioning what Tawana mentioned about now mothers are having to stay home because of remote learning. When mothers were actually, in our community, in our Hispanic Latino community, women were actually, during the time that the children were actually at school, mom actually took advantage of that time to be able to go to work and be able to help the main provider, whether that was the husband or whether there were others in the house. And now they're not able to do that. Because of COVID also, a lot of families were actually laid off from jobs, have not been able to get back to work. And again, the situation with having to stay home and now care for the children and be able to watch out for them or supervise them while they're in remote learning. We're facing the challenges that a lot of the families that we serve don't read or speak English or write English, and even less are computer or technology savvy. I mean, they're not able to navigate. So when you mention Canvas, when you mention Power School, when you mention Zoom, they're like, what is that? You know, so we're seeing the challenges, and we're having to be able to now come together and think of ways that we can actually support the moms that are actually struggling with helping their children and the young girls to be able to navigate the school system or navigate the platforms that are created now to be able to do the remote learning. So those are some of the challenges. And now moms are also trying to think of ways. A lot of the families we serve are actually not privy to unemployment insurance or the stimulus that was sent. So they still have to provide for the families. So one of the things that they were always doing, and I'm going to use respectfully the term hustle, they used to hustle. They used to try to find where they could a job and to be able to provide for the families. And I think that now that they are having to stay home and rethink, okay, how are we going to now go and be able to find a job or a hustle to be able to help the family, it becomes a struggle, which means that now they're looking for third shift jobs. And so who cares for the children now during that time, you know, the third hour of the day, let's say, what if there isn't another adult at home? So there is so many challenges that our families are facing that are affecting our communities. And it's just not the Hispanic Latino community. The Black community also is being challenged with the same situation. So, I mean, my heart goes out to all the families, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to look for different solutions and also put it on the book. So if God forbid this was to happen again, we're ready. You know, we have the resources.
I think the pandemic has impacted our families more than we realize. Because again, you know, you've got the head of the household concerned that they are either on furlough, lost hours. Fortunately, there are services in the community that are still there. Our essential workers are impacted so much because, you know, they're on the front lines, but yet at the same time, I'm sure in their minds, they're thinking of their families, their children. And so the emotional trauma, the anxiety that is sometimes felt within the household, that trickles out to the community. So in some cases, you're creating fear because it's the unknown and people don't know what to do. And so it is impacting us. We see at ESR many families, and as you've spoken, you know, my heart goes out to those that are in need and don't know just what to do. And in our community, there's a support network amongst nonprofit agencies. But beyond that, we have seen the faith-based ministries and so forth really rise to help either through food pantries or counseling programs through the church. And at the same time where there's concern, we've also seen volunteerism where people are reaching out to make a difference and do what they can to help. So it's also created a sense of hope.
Yeah. On that sense of hope, and as a final question, when we come together and we change these statistics, we do what it takes to make these shifts at all these different levels. When we achieve gender and racial equality, what is one thing it would make possible that is not possible now? So inspire us with an idea of what it would open up when we achieve this.
I think when we achieve it, we will be able to empower. We will be able to empower both our community, we will empower our systemic services and change that we have out in the network, but we also will empower the family. It goes back to that sentence of when you know better, you do better. And so I am hopeful that we will be empowered to reach out, to continue to represent the voiceless. When they're not at the table, let us be reminded of the impact of our policies and the decisions that we make. And your choices grow the community so that you have an effect and hopefully some possibilities of leading to bringing the necessary people to the table and the decision makers and the policy making people. We got to hold them accountable. It's interesting that we're in an election year. Let us hold them accountable. Okay, you're elected to these positions. You need to know how your choice and your policy is impacting people throughout our community. And we as people and leaders and others, we need to hold them accountable.
And I think when we get to that, equity and that parity, what we'll begin to see is that we are bringing up and rising up new leaders and new creativity. And what we know from research is that when organizations and systems are diverse and we bring a diversity of thought, we are so much more creative and we come up with such better solutions. And so when we get to the point where people aren't worrying about day-to-day struggles and they can begin to focus and tap into that inner creativity as a whole, as a community, we will begin to see amazing things. But we've got to get to that point where people are not just worrying and struggling with the day-to-day. And that people are educated and they're qualified for the positions that are higher paying positions, and that then they are able to bring their voices to those tables. We are the city of arts and innovation. We can be even more innovative if we have more of these voices at the table that are diverse. We've got to have that radical change to get us there.
Any last words, Odette?
I feel that when we get to that point, I can just envision communities working together, children playing together on the playground, not having to worry about what's for dinner tonight. Am I gonna get a coat before winter gets here? How are we gonna make it to school? Is there gonna be transportation for my mom to go to work? I think that there is gonna be, a tremendous feeling of freedom, a sense of, that they are capable and able to accomplish things or do things, whether it's excel in school, whether it's be able to be together as a family again, because they're not seeing their parents because, they're struggling to be able to make ends meet. So, and also for not-for-profits such as us, community leaders, that sense there is a specific word called volunesia. And volunesia, it's a Filipino word. It's that feeling that you receive when you are actually working and leading to be able to help others and change the life of others. And all of a sudden you realize your life has been transformed. That's volunesia. That's what we are going to be receiving as community leaders and non-for-profit leaders, that feeling of volunesia, a job well done. There is a lot of work to be done, but I know that we can do it together. We can reach that goal if we work together, definitely.
May it be so. Thank you all, thank each of you and all of you together so much for your insights and your wisdom, for your encouragement, and for your boldness to share your own truth and your own perspective. It's been amazing. I encourage everybody to reach out and you can view the report. You can visit the link that's on your screen now to look at and examine the Gender Lens report. And next up, we're going to hear about the 2021 grantees from Wanda Stark.
Thank you to our panelists for providing such thoughtful and engaging conversation around the issues impacting women and girls in our community. As Lori said, we hope that you will take the time to visit the new Through a Gender Lens microsite and engage with us in the new year as we host a variety of community dialogues to determine how we turn the report into action. Now, we've come to a special part of our program. Each year, the Women's Fund seeks to support organizations implementing programs that address the challenges women face in achieving economic security so that all women and girls have equal opportunities. The Women's Fund's unique membership model enables members to pool their financial resources to make grants to improve the lives of women and girls in our community. In addition to providing funding, members participate in the grant-making process by voting on the organizations and programs that will receive funding. This year, our members went above and beyond, contributing additional dollars specifically to grant-making so that we could make an even larger impact. We are so grateful to our members, and it is because of them that 10 grantees will receive funding totaling just over $142,000 this year. And now, I am honored to announce this year's grant recipients. Bethesda Center for the Homeless is awarded $15,000 to provide emergency and supportive services to women who are homeless. Bethesda Center is a leading provider of shelter and supportive services, serving homeless individuals 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Bethesda has a specific program to support single women. Throughout their women's program, Bethesda Center will work with women to regain independence and sustainable housing. Children's Law Center of Central North Carolina is awarded $15,000 to support domestic violence survivors in evaluating their needs and barriers and connecting them to community resources. The Children's Law Center of Central North Carolina provides legal advocacy for children with a focus on those involved with domestic violence or high conflict custody cases. The Children's Law Center and the Winston-Salem Office of Legal Aid of North Carolina joined together to create Stepping Forward, a program that helps domestic abuse clients create stable lives away from their abusers. The program's target population is clients who have recently closed domestic violence cases. The program works with approximately 150 women per year, of which approximately 55% are women of color. City with Dwellings is awarded $10,000 to hire and train female staff to provide peer support for women experiencing homelessness. City with Dwellings seeks to end the crisis of homelessness by building sustainable and supportive community through relationships and mutual support. City with Dwellings maintains connections with individuals who visit their overflow shelters year-round through street outreach, case coordination, advocacy, and programming. Funding from the Women's Fund will be used to hire women who have previously experienced homelessness to serve as trained peer support specialists to offer hope, shared resilience, and encouragement to women who are on their journey toward housing. In 2020, City with Dwellings has helped to house 25 women, with more women planning to move in this fall. El Buen Pastor Latino Community Services is awarded $15,000 to provide technology workshops for women through a new program called A Step Forward for Women. Latino Community Services offers a variety of education and enrichment programs for both children and their parents, including a family literacy initiative that helps mothers prepare their children for kindergarten and tutoring for students. Latino Community Services witnessed many of its families struggle with the COVID-19 pandemic, especially those with school-aged children who had to switch to remote learning in the spring. As a result, Latino Community Services will start A Step Forward for Women, where they will work with mothers on helping their children navigate remote learning, and will also provide sessions on resume writing and how to apply for jobs. The program plans to start with 10 mothers and will meet with them twice a week while providing remote learning assistance for school-age kids and childcare for any younger siblings. Lead Girls is awarded $15,000 to support programs designed to help middle school girls develop critical social and emotional skills. Over the course of a multi-session workshop series, LEAD uses dialogue-focused sessions to engage girls in deep thinking and active communication about their challenges, goals, and aspirations. LEAD also teaches age-appropriate financial literacy, career exploration, and academic success strategies. This year, LEAD enrolled 35 girls in its LEAD Academy at Winston-Salem Preparatory Academy and plans to serve 85 girls by the end of 2020. 30 girls are also enrolled in the Community Lead program. Funding from the Women's Fund will be used to expand its staff to be able to provide more consistent one-on-one time with the girls in 2021. Planned Parenthood is awarded $15,000 to support education, advocacy, and comprehensive health care services for sexual health. Planned Parenthood South Atlantic has provided essential health care and education services in Forsyth County for 40 years. The majority of Planned Parenthood's patients are uninsured women with limited financial resources between the ages of 15 and 30. In the coming year, Planned Parenthood expects to serve at least 3,425 patients at its Winston-Salem Health Center. Planned Parenthood also provides high-quality education programs that reflect the needs of young people, their families, and patients. The primary beneficiaries of the programs are adolescents, parents of adolescents, and women of reproductive age. The Shalom Project is awarded $15,000 for the Flourish program. Flourish is an intensive 18-month program designed to help women who serve as heads of household transition out of poverty. Flourish uses a holistic curriculum that alternates focusing on financial wellness, health and wellness, career guidance, self-empowerment, and personal resilience. Community partners with expertise in many of these areas help to deliver content. The first official Flourish cohort completed a 9-month session in May. 6 women graduated into their second year of the program, and all have made the commitment to return as mentors to a new cohort of women this fall. Flourish shifted to a virtual format earlier this year due to COVID-19 and maintained nearly 100% attendance. Flourish plans to keep the virtual format and blend it with in-person meetings as it becomes safe to do so. The Wells Center is awarded $12,560 for CATCH, which stands for Changing Attitude to Change Habits, a post-release program for formerly incarcerated women. The Wells Center, founded by the current chaplain of the Forsyth County Detention Center, has been providing personal and leadership development programming to incarcerated women for the last 5 years. The Wells Center board and staff have seen how the women they worked with in the pre-release program struggled after being released to gain the support they needed to be successful. CATCH will work with the women to identify their personal goals and plans for how to achieve those goals, and will offer regular mentoring and classes on a wide variety of topics, including healing from trauma and job training. Now, due to the intense nature of the program, the Wells Center plans to work with 20 to 30 women each year. Unity Women's Desk of the Moravian Church is awarded $15,000 to purchase computers and teach technology skills to Latina mothers in the Sunnyside neighborhood. The mission of Unity Women's Desk is to empower women throughout the worldwide Moravian Church in the areas of education, health for women and children, overcoming poverty, education for justice, and women in ministry. Unity Women's Desk is partnering with Estamos Unidos Ministry to implement a program that will empower Latina mothers in the 27107 zip code to navigate the remote learning for their children during COVID-19 and provide a technology foundation for the future. Estamos Unidos offers educational outreach programs to any Spanish-speaking community members without regard to race, religion, or gender. Beginning in 2021, Unity Women's Desk plans to work with approximately 28 women and their children. YWCA of Winston-Salem in Forsyth County is awarded $15,000 to support the Hawley House, a state-licensed recovery facility for women diagnosed with substance use disorder. When Hawley House residents enter the program, they are typically needing assistance with all basic needs. Hawley House residents graduate when they have become self-sufficient. They can pay bills with limited assistance and live in private housing and are substance-free. Hawley House continues to provide support to graduates throughout an aftercare program. In recent years, 90% of graduates have remained self-sufficient and substance-free 12 months after graduation. Congratulations to all of this year's grant recipients. We are so grateful for their work and all of the organizations in our community committed to making a difference in the lives of women and girls. The theme of today's luncheon is where do we go from here? Well, we hope that from today's program, you feel inspired by the work that is already being done and that you have learned of some ways that you can help create and become a part of radical change. I want to thank you for spending your afternoon with us, especially in this unique way. I hope that many of you will join me as a member of the Women's Fund and ask that you continue to financially support the Women's Fund at the level most comfortable for you. To learn more about the fund, to become a member, or to make your best gift, you can visit the Women's Fund's new website, which is displayed on your screen. The Women's Fund's luncheons are always so inspiring to me, even when we can't be together in person. We wanted to end this year by sharing some memories from previous luncheons as a way to celebrate the last 15 years. We hope you enjoy the pictures and reflect on the many times we have come together. We look forward to when we can be together again, but in the meantime, we trust that you will carry forward the thoughts and spirit of this event. Someone once said, a strong woman stands up for herself, but a stronger woman stands up for everybody. Thanks to all of you for standing up for women and girls in our community. And thanks for joining us. We appreciate your company.